Homily for the 17th Sunday of the year C. Teach me to pray. Our readings for this Sunday are from Genesis chapter 18 verse 20 to 32, Colossians chapter 2 verse 12 to 14, and the Gospel of St. Luke chapter 11 verse 1 to 13. The Lord's Prayer is the first and the greatest of all Christian prayers. It contains the basic elements of Christian prayer: worship and petition. It also highlights the basic disposition of submission and surrender, and the childlike trust and confidence required of a praying Christian. It is important to note that the whole prayer is couched in plural terms. Thus, it is not my Father, but our Father, and this implies that we are children of the same Father. Abraham haggles with God. Genesis 18 portrays Abraham as an intimate friend of God with whom the Lord could share his thoughts and plans. The reading portrays Abraham as a shrewd negotiator engaged in some kind of Dutch auction with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. Something one can only do with a very familiar person, not with someone you have only a formal relationship with. Abraham proved himself a persistent and an untiring intercessor who will not give up easily. He took advantage of his relationship with God, and by sheer persistence and near blackmail, he got his generous friend God to agree that if there existed even as few as 10 righteous people in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, the city will not be destroyed. A God who hears and responds. In this passage, God is portrayed as a listening friend, a patient dealer, and a merciful and compassionate judge. This is a radically different image of God than people were used to, and it is quite close to the image of God the Father, pointed for us by Jesus Christ. He is a God who can be moved by a friend's pleading to change his course of action. He heard the cry of the Israelites, saw their miserable plight, and took action to deliver them, as we see in Exodus chapter 3 verse 7 to 10. He sent Isaiah to King Hezekiah, and before Isaiah finished delivering his message, Hezekiah pleaded, and God changed his mind and made him well. 2 Kings chapter 20 verse 1 to 6. Paul and Silas prayed and sang. Then the Holy Spirit came down, and they were miraculously freed from prison. Acts chapter 16 verse 25 to 28. Many other examples abound in the scriptures where God was moved to action in the face of suffering and pain. We are constantly being saved by a generous God. Teach us to pray, Lord. The disciples noticed how close Jesus was to the Father. They often saw him withdraw to pray, usually very early in the morning, long before dawn, as we see in Mark chapter 1 verse 35. The disciples did not know the content of his prayer because he often prayed in silence, but they suspected that his unique power could be linked to those moments spent in prayer. So they said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples." Jesus then taught them the Lord's Prayer. Also known as Our Father, the Lord's Prayer is a model prayer, a perfect and complete prayer. No one knows how to pray very well, because none of us can be an expert in the presence of God. Jesus asks that we do not be like the scribes and the Pharisees who use many words, but that we lock ourselves up in our rooms as we talk to our Father who hears in secret. Prayer is about aligning our wills to the will of God and our hearts to the heart of God, believing that those who leave everything in God's hands will eventually see God's hand in everything. Recognize it with St. Paul that all things work together unto good for those who love God. Trusting in a loving Father. Jesus wants his disciples to see prayer as a filial experience. He wants us to relate with God as Father, with the confidence of children who know that they have a loving Father. Jesus wants Christians to be bold, courageous, and audacious as they approach their loving Father in prayer. His model of a smart Christian is one who keeps knocking at God's door and never quits. Jesus maintained a close, loving relationship with the Father, and he wants us to have the same quality of relationship with our God. The God revealed to us by Jesus is the God of love. He is one who loves to hear us and who loves to speak to us. We must therefore keep on asking, keep on seeking, and keep on knocking. He will answer us. He will give us the best things at the right time. The example of Abraham and the lesson of Jesus should make us to pray with trust, knowing that our loving God has a plan for us and is leading us by the hand. The art of listening in prayer. Christian prayer should be a conversation with God, which flows from a relationship of love with Him and submission to His will. The praying Christian is one who knows how to pour out his or her heart to God, listen to hear God respond, and rise up from prayer comfortable with God's will. This is what happened at the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus poured out his heart. If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But after shedding tears, he surrendered to and he was comfortable with God's will. He then declared, "Let your will, not mine, be done." Whatever time we spend in prayer should leave us feeling better off than before we began, having been in the presence of God. At the heart of Christian prayer lies the preparedness of the Christian to accept his or her lowly state. The acknowledgement that we are only handmaids of the Lord and that we often do not know what is best for us is key to successful prayer life. So we must rely on Him to give us our daily bread, whatever that daily bread will be. The praying Christian must acknowledge that God is all-powerful, all-loving, all-caring, and that God knows best. God bless you.